Torahs. So I'd like to welcome everyone, and we'll welcome everyone with a blessing, giving thanks for the ability to sit down for this hour to study Torah. So let us say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, dear God, for giving us the opportunity to engage ourselves in the study of Torah. So let me just clear this. One of the things that I've been doing the last week and a half or so is I found on Sefaria an interesting little book that was written in, I guess, in Constantinople by a Sephardi Jew, which is called Darkei. I guess it's Darkei Talmud or something like that. I should know that since I've been reading it carefully. And Darkei Talmud, and it's a little short treatise on how one should teach Talmud. And I'm finding it rather fascinating. The author was a man named Isaac Kanpanton. We don't know a lot about him, but that he was active in Constantinople in the 14th, 15th century. So this book is a book on how to teach Talmud. So it is sort of fascinating. And let me just read the beginning passage to you. In my now, I would say, tentative translation. It begins, if one wishes to gain wisdom, one needs to increase the time spent in study. That's from the Talmud. This means that one needs to spend more time focusing well on a specific topic. Studying the topic once is not enough, nor is studying it twice. Every time one reviews a topic, it reveals some new idea. This is what the sages said even after studying a passage 100 times. One would discover something different the next time one studied it, the 101st time, also from the Talmud. Rather than spending all one's time in trade and commerce, one should spend more time sitting quietly alone, since the sages said that spending more time in business does not make one wise. That's from Avot. If one wants to comprehend all that one is looking for in a passage, one cannot grasp it the first time. This is the problem. One cannot gain understanding of a passage without effort. Therefore, strive with industry and diligence to understand it every time one studies it. So there we are. Our first introduction. It takes a long time to study this stuff. Methodologies and studying go back a long time. And this was a little teacher's manual. So if a person has to study Talmud, how to do it. And basically it says, be patient. You'll finally figure it out. And if you get really good, it gets better every time. And also, it's important to spend some time doing, working on your mind. Don't spend all your time working. So let us go into our text. I'm going to start with the share screen and let me see. We finished reading a section on short prayers and prayers in when we're scared, prayers in danger. This is a section that I entitled, Prayer is a Serious Matter. That's my title. It's not the Talmud. It's no other great scholar. It's not from any other book, but this is just what I think the theme of this section is. The sugya is talking about, prayer is serious. And it comes from the Mishnah. We read this Mishnah when we reviewed the Mishnah for this parak 5, but let's take a look at it again. So, would someone care to read this section that is called Mishnah?
I can read.
Okay.
Mishnah. One may only stand and begin to pray from an approach of gravity and submission. There is a tradition that the early generations of pious men would wait 1 hour in order to reach the solemn frame of mind appropriate for prayer, and then pray so that they would focus their hearts toward their Father in heaven. Standing in prayer is standing before God, and as such, even if the king greets him, he should not respond to him. And even if a snake is wrapped around his heel, you should not interrupt his prayer.
Okay, Rochelle, what's going on in there? Now, remember the words in gray are Rabbi Steinsaltz's explanation, expansion, so we can understand the literal text of the Talmud. The black bold-faced words, that is the Talmud itself, or a fairly literal translation of the Talmud.
So it's almost sounding like, what I hear in spiritual practices about, you need to meditate for 2.5 hours to really become one with God. And it sounds like, after an hour, if you made it an hour, you're in the right place. So it's an effort, to get there, but I think maybe that's what it's focusing on, that it really takes you an hour to, stop thinking about, the world and what you're doing and focus. So it looks like it's, supporting that kind of an effort.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to point out, so that, this is, prayer is here clearly seen as a spiritual practice, and that these people who are known as the Hasidim Harishonim, the early pious ones, they would do it very seriously. Now, this is Mishnah, and Mishnah is compiled in the beginning of the 3rd century. So they had a tradition that there was this group of Hasidim Harishonim who had these spiritual practices. I don't think we know very much about who these people were, whether it's referring to a sort of a group or a movement or a school in late Second Temple, early post-Second Temple Judaism, or is it just referring to a general sense of how pious our ancestors were compared to us? We don't know that. And we don't have enough information, at least I don't have enough information even to talk about this as an organized group. So it just may be a common practice. So where do they focus their hearts?
Towards God.
Yes, and what is the word for God here?
Father.
Father, Avihem Shebashamayim. Their Father who is in heaven. So that's a very good Jewish expression describing God from the late Second Temple, early Roman period. Do you know any prayer that begins with that praise?
Isn't there a psalm?
There's a psalm. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Mm-hmm.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's a good, beautiful Jewish prayer, and it sort of helps locate the really origins of Christian prayer and Jewish prayer practice. We talked about that earlier when we talked about the idea of the private prayer, the personal prayer, that sages would often have prayers that they would create either extemporaneously or that they were their favorite prayers that they would use, and that would be expected of any Jewish sage. Now, how deep does your prayer have to be?
Well, I would think pretty deep, because if you have a snake wrapped around your heel, you're not going to interrupt yourself.
No, so you have to be, no, this is have you ever achieved, anyone, that depth of concentration in anything you've ever done?
It reminds me of the whirling dervishes
Yeah.
who, whirled themselves into oblivion. And this is almost the same, to get into such a state. I think when you meditate, that's a goal. It's not to fall asleep. It's to reach a different concentration that, so this is like the same thing. It doesn't matter what's going on around you.
Okay. Do you know where the dervish tradition comes from?
Is it from India?
Well, it's mostly, we see them mostly in Anatolia, but it comes from a Islamic tradition, a type of Islamic spiritual tradition known as Sufism.
Mm.
And Sufis take their name, I guess, from the gray colored robes they used to wear. And they existed, they still continue, but when we talk about the dervishes, they had a practice of just what they call zikr, just as probably related to the Hebrew word zachor, to remember, to keep recalling the divine name. And when you're doing it, you're moving slowly in a dance over and over again, so you get swept up. You can see slow repetitious movement is important. You can see that in some types of Hasidic celebration. They often add a little liquor to that, but that sort of moving around the room, around and around, can create the sense. But there's something actually within the Hebrew Jewish prayer book, traditional prayer book, that can help you move on that way. One is in general movement. One is supposed to be fairly loose in the way one stands during prayer. One doesn't necessarily stand stiff as a soldier. One is more relaxed, and sometimes that leads to a certain, just sort of a swaying of the body. The language is often very repetitious. You keep saying the same thing over and over again, so it can develop a certain rhythm. And also the chanting is often repetitious, so it can bring you into the mood. So in some way, traditional Jewish prayer, if you do it probably the way I think it's designed, it becomes more than just reading words. It becomes becoming involved in the word. So there is still that there. Our modern prayer is much more, is a little different in style. So I'm not saying one is better than the other, and both traditions exist, but here they have this, really get very, very deep into prayer. And ideally, you should be so swept up to be so close to the divine in your prayer practice that even if the human king greets you, you're not silent. Even if you feel you're threatened, a snake, you're okay. So now the word that they use for being serious is koved rosh. Koved, that's right up here. That's a funny expression. Rosh is head. A koved is literally with a heavy head, but here it means sort of, I think, the translation of gravity. That sense of being rooted is very good here. Okay, so now we're going to have to figure it out, because this is like the first thing the Gemara often wants to do is know what's going on here. Where did you get this idea that you have to be so focused? So if someone wants to read starting in paragraph number 15.
I'll read.
Okay.
Gemara. We learned in the Mishnah that prayer should be undertaken in an atmosphere of gravity. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived?
Okay, so that's, you understand that, Judy? That's like, I said something, the Mishnah says something. Mishnah doesn't give sources. Mishnah doesn't have footnotes. In some way, that's a sort of an outrageous statement the Mishnah claims to be telling us what the Torah says, but very rarely does the Torah direct us immediately back to scripture, either Torah, the Chumash, or to any other scripture. Not that there aren't examples where it does, but often it just states things, and we are to assume that the statement of the oral law, the Mishnah, is connected to something in the written law, Torah, and scripture. So they always have to ask this question: where the heck did they get this idea from? So Rabbi Eliezer is going to give us one example. So let's start with Rabbi Elazar.
Rabbi Elazar said they are derived from the verses describing the prayer of Hannah, mother of Samuel, as the verse states, and she felt bitterness of soul, and she prayed to the Lord, and she wept and wept.
Okay. So you may be familiar with this story, the story of the birth of Samuel.
Mhm.
It's part of the Haftarahs, the liturgical readings for the high holidays. So here she is. Do you know the story? Can anyone review the story of Hannah?
Yeah, Hannah was bereft over being barren.
That's right.
So she was praying to God and weeping, and she was taken for a drunkard.
That's right.
And
And she promised if she had a son,
right,
that she would
that she would
give him up to the priesthood.
have him
So she,
devote his life to God.
so she's part of a polyamorous, polygamous family. Her co-wife Penina has lots of kids. She doesn't have any. She wants a kid. She just prays her heart out when she goes to the shrine at Shiloh, and Eli, the high priest, misunderstands her the depth of her prayer. So she is so caught up into this. So the Hebrew is Vihi Marat Nafesh, so that she felt bitterness in her soul. She has this like great emotional feeling. So do you like that as a reason why we should be praying with gravity?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You think it's a good example?
Yeah, I really like this example.
Yeah. Well, it's a great example. And Hannah's prayer, we'll see, hopefully maybe today or maybe next week, it becomes sort of the model of Jewish prayer, but it isn't enough because she has marat nafesh. You know, her heart is bitter. So that may not be good. And perhaps there's a reason for her bitterness, that it doesn't work. So since you read about Hannah, Judy, can you read number 16?
Sure. The Gemara rejects this proof. From what does that conclusion ensue? Perhaps Hannah is different, as her heart was extremely embittered. Her prayer was embittered as well. This does not prove that everyone must pray in that frame of mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to really take his explanation, but this is, I think, a unique case. You know, she has a lot of sarot, a lot of soros, and that's really praying. But, you know, thank God most of us don't have so much pain and trouble all the time. So
What is she praying for?
she's praying for her son, a
Right.
child.
So I thought our prayer isn't supposed to be asking. You know, in the previous page, what was the intention of the prayer? It was to get close to God, not to ask for something. So to me, this is a little bit confusing.
Okay, yeah, that is a confusion. She is, she wants a child and she's praying for a child, but she's also in great emotional pain. And when you're in pain, sometimes, you're more likely to maybe reach out to something spiritual. And it gives us the opportunity then to connect to something greater.
Mhm.
Rabbi,
Yes.
isn't it true though that you can ask for things because, and the reasoning behind that is because you're specifically prohibited in the Amida on Shabbat to ask for things.
Yeah, that's right. Lou, you're right. On the other day, we do ask for things. Most of the things we ask for in the standing prayer, the Amida, are fairly general. But I'm going to actually think about something else. Often people who are suffering great distress pray, and they find some sort of strength and consolation, even though the situation that causes their distress continues.
Rabbi, doesn't that point again to having God just listen?
Okay, what's up?
Do you want to go?
Rabbi.
I think that's an interesting way of going. Do you want to expound on that, Judy, or anyone else?
Just that, it kind of addresses the asking thing, just to have God listen to us is valuable enough, and that it gives us strength to, even if our distress is not going to be mitigated. And that makes prayer extremely important in your life.
Yeah. So that request will then change, or sort of the sense of being in need opens up oneself, an individual, perhaps to a connection, to a sense of having someone hear one's pain. So, yes,
so
Ira.
Rabbi, is it that we're prohibited from praying for something, or is it this is just one rabbi, from the past? This is one rabbi's interpretation versus another. So I don't see that we can't pray for something. It's just this is just different approaches to prayer.
Yeah, I think when you sort of do a hierarchy of prayer, prayers of thanksgiving, prayers of praise are better than prayers of petition, because
Right, but it
really
doesn't mean that you can't. It just,
yeah.
right.
And I think the answer here is when you pray you have a prayer of petition, as Judy pointed out, we saw the answer is not that your prayer is going to be, your wish is going to be granted. God isn't the genie in the bottle. God is Shomea Tefillah. God isn't the one who listens to prayer. God isn't the one who answers prayer. So I think this is why I think that happening here is that when we pray for something and we have this a great need, that opens ourselves up, and just to be heard, just to have our need acknowledged is all that we want. You can see this in actually the Jewish practice of Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. And the most important thing when you visit someone who's sick is to be there.
I think it's the same thing when you talk to your friend who may have suffered a great loss, is not to offer all kinds of advice, or just to be there. I called to see how you are.
Yeah. And
what do you, go from
good.
there.
What are you supposed to tell someone at a Shiva?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I'm here.
That's basically it. I'm here. So that I think this idea of being present is very important. So
Mhm.
Hannah's so embittered, and then that sort of opens her up. But we have another proof text. So the next proof text is 17. Does someone want to read this proof text? Another rabbi makes another rabbi makes another.
I'll read it,
Okay,
Rabbi.
please. Thank you, Mark.
Rather, Rabbi Rosei, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, "It can be proved from here, as David said, but as for me, by your abundant loving kindness, I will enter your house. At your holy temple, I will bow in reverence for you." Entering into prayer, like entering the holy temple, must be performed reverentially.
And you know this line, "V'ani barov chastecha avo vetecha eshtachave al haka kodshecha b'yarecha." We have that quoted in the Yom Tovu, which is a collection of biblical verses. "V'ani barov chastecha," and with all your chesed, I'm able to come into your house, and I'm going to pray, eshtachave, bow down in your heichal, your holy palace, with this concept of reverence, yirah. Okay, you like it?
Yes.
Yes.
Why do you like it, Mark? I think it's good. Why is it good? Why is this a good proof text?
It's gratitude
Yeah.
for the loving kindness it's been shown.
Yeah. And does it show you, does this prove to you, is this a good proof text that one should be koved rosh, one should be pray with gravity, with depth, with sincerity, with weight?
I think so.
Okay.
It's a goal.
Yes, Judy?
It's a goal.
Okay. Well, since from the last example of Hannah, the Gemara is going to question it. So now the Gemara is going to question this one as well. So Mark, you want to read why the Gemara is
Gemara
asking?
rejects this proof as well. From what does that conclusion ensue? Perhaps David is different, as he would excessively afflict himself in prayer in order to atone for his transgression with Bathsheba. Oy,
Mhm.
oy.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, there's like two great verses. One is, Hannah, but don't we have to worry about her? She's in, she is in such great pain. And now we have David, and David's praying. Well, the reason why David's praying is, what's the reason, Mark, that the Gemara is suggesting?
He feels guilty and he's trying to assuage that guilt.
Yeah, or assuage the guilt, seek atonement, whatever it is. He committed a pretty big sin.
Yes.
Everyone knows the sin of Bathsheba, with Bathsheba. I'll repeat it. Bathsheba was a very beautiful woman, and she was married to Hiram the Hittite, who was a commander in David's army. David is on the top of his palace. The top of David's palace overlooks the entire city, and people did all their daily activities. Bathsheba was doing her bathing on the top of her house. King David saw, fell in love with her, brings her into the palace, and there's a little hanky-panky going on, and David finds out that she's with a child, she's in a family way, and that's like a big thing. So he sends Hiram out to the battlefront, where he is given the honor of leading a charge on the city, and he dies. She's a widow, so they can get married. The child is born, the child dies. No matter what David said, there's a wonderful confrontation story with David and one of his advisors, the prophet Nathan, who tells a parable of a rich man and a poor man, and how the rich man steals the poor man's pet sheep to serve for dinner, even though he had hundreds and hundreds of his own sheep. It's a very important, interesting story. And David is devastated. Now, when we look at the story and we look at Bathsheba and her history in the Bible, she is probably a co-conspirator. I mean, you don't necessarily write her off as an innocent person
No.
seduced by the king. She's her final goal in life is making sure that her son Solomon is king. So we don't know all the backstory, but David obviously does something wrong, and David does have a problem with women. You do know that he has what we might call zipper disease. So he's repenting this. So he's just like, but how many people here, how many people do you know sin as deeply as David? I mean, you may know people who've committed adultery, who've been unfaithful, but how many people do you know arranged for the death of someone?
Not many people.
Personally, no.
Personally, no. So, I mean, this is a rather, thank God, unusual situation.
But the
So,
feeling of guilt isn't, right?
the feeling of guilt isn't.
Not.
So how can the deep feeling of guilt, bring you, into give a sense that prayer should be serious?
You feel bad, you want to atone, even if it's nothing, that's an extreme, but even if you hurt somebody, you feel bad and you want to somehow atone for it. And does prayer help you atone for it? I don't know. I don't know how it could do that, but you want some comfort from God, maybe saying, forgive me, or I don't know how it could help,
But are you asking to be forgiven or to be relieved of the pain, which are two different things?
I think that's really good, Lou. That was going to be where I wanted to go. Thank you.
right.
Yeah. Sometimes we are harder than ourselves than the person whom we may have offended is on us. That sometimes it's harder to forgive ourselves.
True.
And it's impossible to get on with that burden of guilt. And I'm sure we've all may have hurt a friend or a loved one in a ways that we found just devastating, and we can't really reconnect with them until we can get beyond our own sense of guilt. And that might be a place where prayer gives us the opportunity to examine, who we are, to open up who we are, and that sense that we are forgivable is really a very powerful thing.
Well, it might not necessarily
I think
be guilt.
on Yom,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Who is speaking? I can't see everyone, unfortunately.
I'll wait. Rochelle, you can speak first, and then I'll
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, it's not necessarily you feel guilt because you did something bad to someone. You can have like survivor's guilt, those type of things. And I think prayer would definitely help that.
Yeah.
Those kind of guilt feelings. I think that, we need to think about that too. So it's not only atoning, but to get some comfort from God.
So it is actually a
Yep.
way of saying that prayer is serious. Okay, Ira, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I think about Yom Kippur, where we pray for we're asking for forgiveness for things that we may or may not even have done.
Yeah.
Almost like covering our bases. So it's not necessary that we really feel guilty. We're not sure, but still we need that sense of of, I don't know, wholeness or something that comes out of Yom Kippur.
Okay. Yeah. I think for many people, who are dealing trouble, this is just from my personal experience as a rabbi, telling someone that you can be forgiven is a liberating thing.
No, very.
That the idea is that one may feel so terrible about oneself. One is, sort of rejecting oneself and doesn't see how one connects in the world. And the message that you are forgivable, or put into more religious language, God forgives you, is a way of moving on, dealing with what you have to do, accepting responsibility for what you have to do. If you ever watch Father Brown Mysteries,
Oh, yeah. I love
you know,
that.
at the end, he always tells the person who just committed the most atrocious murder, you can, you will be forgiven if you accept
God still loves you.
responsibility, and God still loves you.
Right.
Now that may sound very Christian, but it isn't necessarily, it isn't limited to Christianity. You'll see that in Judaism and Islam as well. God is the one who is ultimately merciful. But that doesn't mean you don't have responsibility. It's not God's forgiveness is not a get out of jail free card. But it's also that. Okay, so that doesn't work. So we're going to have another one. And let me pull your pictures out of the way. So Rabbi Joshua ben Levi said, would someone like to continue reading here?
I can read.
I'll read.
Okay, please. So if you haven't read yet, please read.
Go ahead.
The Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, it can be derived from here, from this verse that David said, not about his own worship, but about worship of God in general. Give unto the Lord the honor of his name. Bow to the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Do not read in the beauty of Behadrat holiness. Rather read in trembling of Behadrat holiness. One must enter into prayer from an atmosphere of gravity engendered by sanctity.
Okay, well, this is a pun. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is saying, if I read the word Hadrat Kodesh, which starts with a hey, you can see the little hey over here, and I change that, and I put a chet, it changes it. So Behadrat is sort of beauty, but if I say Chedrat, that's trembling. You know that word Chet Dalid Reish, it means to tremble, and the term that the ultra-Orthodox often use for themselves is the Haridim, those who are trembling in the presence of God. So he says, let's change the reading of Psalm 92. He's Havul Adonai Kavod Va'oz, Havul Adonai, no, Ishtachavu Adonai B'Chadrat Kodesh. We read that psalm, Psalm 29, I think on Shabbat, Kabbalat Shabbat. And here he says, let's change the reading and that will prove it for me. So David really wanted to say not glory or beauty. He wanted to say Cheredat, trembling. Comfortable with manipulating biblical verses to prove your point?
No.
No. But it's not an unusual thing to do. Hebrew doesn't come with vowels, so it's easy to just shift the traditional vocalization. Here it's a little tougher. Hey and chet are related letters. They are both guttural letters. One is a voiced and the other is not a voiced, like aleph and ayin. But this seems to me, well, let's see what the Gemara says. So who's reading? Was that you, Gail?
I was.
Okay,
Yeah.
continue.
The Gemara rejects this too. From what does that conclusion ensue? Perhaps, actually, I would say to you that it should be read as it is written, specifically in the beauty, and it means that one should pray in beautiful clothing, as in the case of Rav Yehuda, who would adorn himself and then pray. Rav Yehuda believed that one who comes before the king must wear his most beautiful clothing. The Gemara has yet to find a source for the halakha that one must approach prayer from an atmosphere of gravity.
Okay, so we have a nice one. This is a nice thing. When you go to shul, you should look good. That's basically it. Particularly on Shabbat or in the holidays, you don't go like a schlepper. No, what is looking good changes in time and place, but you should look good. Whatever we think is beautiful, you should put on your good clothes.
But Rabbi, up to now, we haven't been talking about going to synagogue to pray. We're talking about just praying. So, it seems a little bit odd just to talk about, what you wear to go to shul. So
I know, but I don't know if Rabbi Yehuda put on, maybe he put on his fancy dress, his fancy bathrobe when he was praying at home rather than the terry cloth one. He put on the silk one. I don't know.
well, the implication of beautiful clothing, I think, to me, is almost like trembling. It's saying that, you're taking it seriously and you have respect. So maybe it's not literal beautiful clothing, but it means that you having respect for someone. When you meet them, you want to look your best to show respect. So maybe it's just implying that.
I think that's good. I would agree, but then I would argue
I would,
all the more so if you're doing this at home when you're praying to God in private. What happens? How should you be when you're praying to God in public? So I think you're right, Rochelle. Someone else had something. Was that you, Lou?
I would, yeah, it's Ira.
Ira.
Yeah. I would amplify that a little bit more because a lot of folks were workers.
Yeah.
It wasn't like their jobs were white collar jobs. So the idea is if you're going to pray, you change your clothes from the dirty clothes of the field or whatever it is that you're doing to make that separation.
Good.
And I had 2 points.
Yeah.
One of them is that in the world today, even when you go to meet someone on business or you're a volunteer and you meet someone, you dress. Until 10 years ago, men used to put on a coat and tie for everything. And the other thing I would mention is that you shouldn't, I think this implies in a way, or I'm grabbing from it, that you should pray in private like you should pray in public with the respect and the dress. If you're going to shul, you get dressed. So if you're going to pray at home, you get dressed.
Yeah. Except if you're praying on Zoom, you can dress like a news anchor and you just have to be dressed from the waist up. And you can wear whatever you want underneath.
But then again, you're not following this.
Then you're not following.
You're faking an appearance.
You're faking an appearance. Again, like a newscaster.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on. Let's finish this section. What is
Rabbi Rab Naaman Bar Yitzchak said, it can be derived from this verse, serve the Lord in fear and rejoice in trembling.
Okay. Ivdu Adonai b'yira v'gilu b'ra'ada. Wow. So that's actually a very interesting verse. So you have Eve, service is in ira, which is our word for, we say fear, but it also means reverence. And then rejoice, gilu bira'ada. So when you rejoice, there has to be a sense of trembling. So the Gemara is going to ask about this one. So unless someone has an answer, we're going to see what the Gemara says. My gilu bir'ada. How do you rejoice and trembling at the same time? So paragraph 20.
Having cited this verse from Psalms, the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of rejoice with trembling? Rav Ada bar Matana said that Rabbah said, one may not experience unbridled joy, even where there is rejoicing, there should be trembling.
Okay. So what is Rabbah saying?
That's why we break the glass at the end of the wedding ceremony,
Good. How did you know that?
because it's symbolic of, one of the symbols of it is the destruction of the temple. So
Okay.
even when we're rejoicing the highest high, we still have to, that it's that Jewish thing where no matter, you can't be totally happy all the time.
That's right. Now, the other side is that you can't be totally depressed all the time either.
Absolutely.
But yes, the world is in some way incomplete. So that could be a reason to tremble. Another is that could be that we know that everything is passing, so we can't hold on to our joys because they will pass just as our pain will pass.
You just can't be foolish about life.
Yeah.
You have to be realistic. I think you said that Judaism is very realistic. And I think it is.
Okay, I have a hand up with Lou.
The other thing is, if we go back to the verse in Psalms, it says, serve the Lord in fear and in rejoice with trembling. So while you're rejoicing, you're still fearing.
Yeah, that, or, it's we can tremble at all sorts of things. Joy can be overwhelming.
Mhm.
That there's a certain joy that one can have, let's say when one first sees in one's life the Grand Canyon. That is like, wow, I'm so happy to be here. Or but also, wow, this is overwhelming. Or for many
Mhm.
people, they get to Jerusalem, for Jewish people, and they see the Kotel. I'm so glad, I'm so happy I'm here. It's been a dream of a lifetime, and yet this is really emotionally overwhelming, and we have that sense of perhaps trembling.
And
I
maybe
feel-
it's realizing that, others are not as well off as you. You're rejoicing and you're happy, but just remember, be grateful that there are other people that are not in a position to rejoice.
Yeah,
So
but
that's
Yeah.
what it is to me.
we just had a reminder of that, all those terrible people, the terrible events in Eastern Turkey and Northern Syria. It's just
Absolutely.
just overwhelming sorrow, how nature is just
Mhm.
taken over. We think also about now, we're feeling very safe and content. All our struggles seem pretty small when you compare it to what's happening in the Ukraine or in
Absolutely. Mhm.
or in southern Sudan. I mean, they're just terrible places in the world. So yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's really good. Okay, so now we're going to have an example. We always like a Misa, a Maaseh, and number 21. Would someone care
Rabbi
to read?
Cindy raised her hand.
Oh,
also.
Cindy, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Cindy? Cindy, you have something to say? Okay. Oh, I think Cindy pushed a button and just dropped out.
Oh.
Ira, if she tries to come in, just well,
I will admit her. Yeah, she's probably in her car
okay, here
Yeah.
she
or
is.
someplace else.
Oh, here she is.
I
Yeah.
see her.
Cindy, you back?
It takes a while.
Okay. She's probably in her car. She
Okay, I got knocked off for a second. I was just, can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was just curious if the trembling was kind of like the Pentecostal thing, where sometimes
Hmm.
the trembling can
Interesting.
be like your religious fervor.
Mm.
Why would you think not?
No, I just like when when we were talking about it, that's like what I was seeing. Like I watched the recent Elvis movie, and I had no idea that, you know, he was kind of involved in that. And when he was entertaining and shaking and things like that, it almost looked like a religious experience, other than, you know, when he was, you know, banned for doing that from a sexual perspective. But I just, when we were talking about trembling, that's just what came to mind.
Yeah, I think that's really actually, I
Yeah,
would agree with
good.
you. I don't, yeah. When the spirit takes over you, you can go into trembling. If you've ever watched some people when they are davening, they're shuckling so much, that's a trembling type of mode. Sometimes when people are so happy, they start bouncing up and down and trembling. Do you ever see that? You know, you
sure.
hear some phenomenal good news.
Yep.
You know, people they're bouncing. So yeah, I think that's a really good and good thing. We don't really do a lot of that type of response within a Reformed congregational practice. But no, yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay, let me shrink you guys again so I can see what's going on. So on that note, the Gemara relates Abaye, fourth generation Amora. He's actually an interesting guy. He was sitting before his teacher Rabbah, who was his uncle, and Rabbah saw that he was excessively joyful. He said to Abaye, "It is written, rejoice with trembling. One's joy should not be unrestrained." And Abaye said to him, it is permissible for me because I am donning phylacteries, my tefillin. Now, and as long as they are upon me, they ensure that the fear of God is upon me. Okay. So this is interesting that he's wearing his tefillin. So he's so happy, but the tefillin are serving a special purpose.
Yeah, so Rabbi, I've actually seen with some of the more I call them black hat
Yeah, Haredim.
Jews that the Haredi that at times when they're praying or even discussing the Talmud, they will break out into joy. All of a sudden their words have a melodic sense to them. So I think there's at least an approach that goes towards this unrestrained joy
Yeah.
in some areas of Judaism, that maybe at a certain point they feel that they need to walk it back a little bit, but there are times, or in Purim.
Yeah. Purim is where we
So
don't
I
walk
think
anything back.
we have examples in Judaism.
Simchat Torah.
Simchat Torah. Now, do we have opportunities for that level of passion within our prayer service? And how would it appear? That would be a good homework assignment
Yeah.
for us to think about. But no, is our worship sufficiently passionate? Does it have enough spirit to it? And if not, why? Why not? And can we change that? So think about that, because we're talking about worshiping God in the spirit of beauty, that I come to you with reverence, that there's joy and trembling when you're before God. Okay, well, I want to just continue. We have another discussion of this because I want to end up with something that Judy talked about. So I'm just going to go through again. Similarly, the Gemara relates that Rabbi Yeremiah was sitting before Rabbi Zera. He saw that Rabbi Yeremiah was exceedingly joyful. And Rabbi Zera said, "It is written, in all sorrow there is profit," from Psalms. And then Rabbi Yeremiah said to him, "It is permissible. I am donning phylacteries." So there's something about putting on your tefillin that shows your respect for God. That's something to be interested in. And then number 5, this is, I think, the nicest one. So does someone want to read 25?
I could read it.
Okay.
On a similar note, the Gemara relates, Mar, son of Ravina, made a wedding feast for his son, and he saw the sages, who were excessively joyous. He brought a valuable cup worth 400 zuz and broke it before them, and they became sad.
Okay. Read the next one, number 2.
The Gemara also relates, Rav Ashi made a wedding feast for his son, and he saw the sages, who were excessively joyous. He brought a cup of extremely valuable white glass and broke it before them, and they became sad.
Okay. So we have here an early example of what Judy mentioned, right, Judy?
Yes.
Okay. So, and finally, we have this little thing. So you want to continue reading? What was that? Mark,
Sure.
Okay.
Did you
Similar.
mean me?
Yeah,
No.
on number 3.
Number 3. Okay. The sages said to Rav Hamuna Zudi at the wedding feast of Mar, son of Ravina, let the master sing for us. Since he believed that the merriment had become excessive, he said to them, singing, woe unto us, for we shall die. Woe unto us, for we shall die. They said to him, what shall we respond after you? What is the chorus of the song? He said to them, you should respond, where is Torah and where is mitzvah that protect us?
Boy, that would be a great wedding song. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, happy birthday to you. Sung to do.
Well, Rabbi,
Yes.
I went to a Jewish sleepaway camp,
Yeah.
and we had a birthday song that said, there is sorrow in the air, people dying everywhere, but happy birthday.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah. So we know there is no, the sense is that, yeah, we're done. Okay, that we have a couple more minutes, so that, yes, even in the best of times, woe to us, for we shall die. Woe to us, for we shall die is going
We're
to
going to
come
actually
back later.
lose that piece of the that piece of the recording. I don't know why it stopped, but the piece of the recording, once it stopped, that's it. So anything afterwards, we may not be able to join.
Okay, that's okay. So we have this ending that, with joy, every good thing comes to an end. And do we have enough time to finish this? No, we'll stop here.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I was just going to say, it's like the marriage scene in Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay.
where everyone's happy, and then they
Yes.
start remembering the people who weren't there, and they're crying excessively, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, so we had a lot of interesting stuff today. Let me just see if I can get out of my share screen as easily. Let's see, stop share there. Good, now I can see everyone. So we talked a little bit about, how one should pray, that it should be a serious thing. One should pray with gravity. We saw the use of various proof texts and how the Gemara sort of, suggests it and doesn't suggest it. And I think our discussion sort of really helped us understand, why are these things problematic and how emotional states can be both positive and negative in prayer. And we also had that sense of, prayer should be not only serious, but should be passionate. And I guess our homework assignment is, think about, in general ways, is the type of worship that we have serious and passionate. And maybe we can get some ideas. The other thing is, we've learned a little bit about what Judy mentioned, why we break the glass. And I'm so much happier that we break the glass than have the cantor sing as you leave the chuppah, and we will die. No, that's like a little, that would be a little too much.
Knowing
But
you so well, I'm so happy that this rabbi doesn't sing at all.
yes. Well, I said the cantor.
Knowing you as well as I do.
Yeah. I said the cantor would sing it. I won't sing it, but no, just mentioning that. So I want to thank everyone for being here. So next week we'll continue studying this. Then we'll hopefully get into the prayer of Hannah, and we'll read the prayer and see how the rabbis use it. That'll probably be next week, maybe the week after. And maybe I'll read you another paragraph from Darkei HaTalmud, how one should teach Talmud from the 14th, 15th century. So that's about it. So thank you very much. Everyone be well, be healthy, be happy, and
Thank you very
take
much.
a walk.
Thank
you
you.
everyone for being
Thank you,
here.
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.